Our sandstone pathway is going to be laid over concrete timber frame on the side that's next to the house. I'm fixing this part of our frame to the stump strips of plywood so we can bend it and end up with the curve we need. I keep adding more stakes to soften the shape of this curve. 75mm of this gravel.
You come and go like a monsoon rain. You hide and show like a lightning bolt. You have it all.
Our sandstone pathway is going to be laid over concrete for strength and durability. In the last episode, I started the preparation for this by removing 150mm of dirt all the way along our pathway. This morning, our gravel base was delivered. I was able to get this dumped right next to where we're going to be using it. I usually try to get my gravel and sand products dumped on top of a tarpaulin. That way we don't get any contamination between our material and the grass and soil. My process for creating this sandstone pathway is to attach the flagstone to concrete with tile cement. Gluing the natural stone to a stable concrete base creates a really durable and strong pathway. For this system to work effectively, I need the concrete to be dead flat and set at the appropriate height, so our pathway ends up at the right height. To create a concrete slab in this way, we need a timber frame or timber formwork to help us manage the concrete, creating the right borders and height for the slab. I have to construct a sturdy and accurate timber frame for our concrete slab, and that's what we're going to be doing today. We're starting our timber frame on the side that's next to the house. This formwork is going to stay buried behind the concrete and won't be removed, unlike the outside formwork, which we'll be pulling off once our concrete's set up. Once I have all the pieces installed along the side of the house, we get to the section where our staircase foundation is going to be. I'm fixing this part of our frame to the stumps that hold the deck up. I lock the plank in with one screw when it's at the right height. This allows me to adjust it after I've checked with my spirit level to get it on the right height at the other end. Then I lock it in with another screw. When these timbers are locked in at the right height, they work as an indicator to let me know how much more sand I need to remove. I use the excess sand as backfill behind these boards to help stop the concrete pushing them out. I then use my rake to even out the whole pathway now that we know what height we need the sand to be at. The width of these boards represents the thickness of all the material we're going to be adding before we stick our stone on. The top of these boards is where the top of our concrete is going to be finished. So we finished setting our edge along the building side here, stop the concrete from pouring under the void in the bottom of the house. The outside edge of our path has a curve in it as it enters the roadway. The best way to create a curve in our concrete slab is to use strips of plywood so we can bend it and end up with the curve we need. I mark up some 7mm ply with my spirit level to the same thickness of the 2x4s we'll be using in the straight sections of our formwork. With all our plywood strips cut to the right thickness, I need to prepare the 2x4 so we can have a seamless join on the concrete when we pour it later. I'm cutting out a space in the 2x4 the same thickness as the plywood. After trimming the 2x4 that's going to make up the straight part of our pathway to the right length, I set it in place to prepare the assembly of the plywood piece that's going to be attached to it. I'm using my spirit level to align these two places in a completely flat plane. This is going to ensure that the concrete comes out flat at this junction point. I'm fixing the plywood strip to the 2x4 with 3 screws for extra strength. And here you can see how the plywood sits flush with the 2x4. After roughly placing it in the correct position, I need to attach another piece on the end next to the deck. I always drill pilot holes before putting in screws, especially at the end of a piece of timber. Without a pilot hole, you'll split the timber and it'll create a really weak join. With all the parts assembled for our outside edge, I put it in place, lining it up with the deck stump that we're going to attach it to. I'm double checking with my square to make sure everything's going to come out plumb. Then I fix it off with a heavy screw. I always double check the joins to make sure they're plumb, as this is going to ensure that our concrete slab comes out completely flat. By checking measurements with my tape measure at regular intervals, I can ensure this outside edge is going to come out parallel to the building. It's critical to double check our measurements and make sure the timbers are square and plumb, as this is going to create the foundation for what we'll be laying the stone on and creating the entire pathway step. I'm double checking the level at the far end of our formwork before we move on to adding the cross pieces that's going to create the slight slope for the runoff of the rain. It's also going to lock in the outer edge of our formwork to the building so we have a nice parallel pathway. I'm using my large set square to double check this piece before I lock it into the building side of our formwork. I'm using scrap pieces of plywood as packers to help me align this cross piece to the outer edge of our formwork. I'm taking my time with this process as it's critical for these bits of timber to be completely flat, otherwise our concrete won't come out correctly. Once our cross piece has been assembled securely, I double check with my tape measure that we've got a parallel connection, and then adjust the packers using my spirit level to create a very gradual slope. This is what's going to create the slight runoff of the pathway to help it drain onto the grass area. I repeat this whole process with the cross piece we're putting in the center of the pathway. Once this is locked in place, it'll create a really solid rectangle. Then we can move on to working on the end of the pathway where the curve is. I create the curved edge of our pathway with this flexible plywood piece we'd attach to the 2x4. I'm using some short stakes to rough out the curve, locking in the far end and working my way back to the flat part of our pathway. Once I'm satisfied the curve's on the right shape, I add more stakes along the plywood edge until I create a really firm structure for the concrete to form up against. I double check with my level before I fix the formwork off to the stakes with screws. As the curve takes shape, I keep adding more stakes in between the existing stakes to soften the shape of this curve. Here you can see how we've achieved a very gradual curve, starting from the straight part of the pathway up to the side of our road. The end of the pathway where it transitions into the driveway is engineered a little differently from the rest of the pathway. It has a slight slope on it to match the height difference between the driveway and the general part of the pathway. And also the concrete's going to be a lot thicker to make sure that it's strong enough if it gets driven on by a car or a truck that it doesn't crack our pathway. So this end of the pathway is going to be almost double the thickness. So here I've attached a piece of our 7mm plywood to a 2x4 to create the extra thickness for the concrete we'll be pouring later. I also have to set this at the slight angle to create the very subtle ramp that we'll end up with on the end of the path. Once I've installed this piece at the correct angle, I can add the very end piece that completes the formwork for the concrete. This last piece at the end also has a slight curve, so I've used our 7mm plywood to create this form. We're just repeating the same process of locking it in with stakes and screwing them off. Having this timber formwork set at the right height and shape is what's going to ensure that our stone pathway ends up at the right height and shape to fit this space. The finished timber form also enables me to add the right amount of base gravel that's going to be underneath the concrete and add extra stability and drainage for the finished product. Being able to have the gravel right next to where I need to put it is really convenient. It's not always the case on my job sites. I often have to cart these kind of materials in with my wheelbarrow. But in this case, I'm able to shovel it directly from where it was dumped into my formwork. My plan is to add about 75mm of this gravel. Our formwork has created about 150mm deep void. So the bottom half will be gravel and the top half will be 75mm of concrete. We're building on sand here, so I'm adding an extra thick gravel base under my concrete for stability.
Yesterday there was sun and there was rain, beauty in the mundane. And as the light startled our eyes, we let go of disguise. And now there's something in the air and a sparkly shimmer on our skin.
As I mentioned earlier in the episode, this end of the pathway is being engineered differently from the rest of it. The foundation here is being built for road traffic as if it was a driveway. Because of its proximity right next to the road, it's inevitable that cars are going to drive on the edge of this. So to stop it cracking in the future, we're pouring a 150mm slab here and doubling the amount of reinforcement steel mesh, which is my standard engineering system for building pathways that are going to be driven on.
Hand in hand, building castles out of sand, reaching for the grand. As willows align, we lose track of time. Head up high, now we climb. Oh, dreamy, breezy, we go. Easy, easy on our tiptoes.
You can see how the pathway's been broken up into different sections with the cross timbers running across the path. This is to create what we call expansion joints. This is the last section we have to fill with gravel.
I wouldn't want it any other way, no. Dreamy, breezy, we go. Easy, easy on our tiptoes, undercover.
Join me on the next episode as we pour concrete for the foundation that's going to be under our staircase. By pouring our concrete in sections, it keeps it more manageable.
And now there's something in the air and a sparkly shimmer on our skin, restoring everything within. Oh, dreamy, breezy, we go.
Thanks for joining me this week on my YouTube channel. Check the link below, and while you're at it, hit the subscribe button or make a comment so I can help you with your future construction solutions. And don't forget to follow our channel for more ideas and how-to tips for home and garden projects.